Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I will start with introduction. I am Dr. Miurka Eli Batista, and I am the Executive Director here at the amazing Office of Multilingual Curriculum and Programs.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Charlotte Brickhouse. I am the Executive Director in the Office of Specialized Services with a focus on instructional programs and services.
I'm trying to go to the next slide. Did I do this? Hold on. Hold on, guys. So sorry. Okay, so we are a very small group. I'm going to take these questions and I'm going to have you read over them. And I'm going to say, pick one, drop it in the chat, take yourself off mute. What are your thoughts?
I guess I'll go first. The question is, how do you foresee continuing your own professional development and growth in this particular area? This is, full transparency, very new to me. When I was in the classroom at my previous school, we only had maybe 3 L students, and they were like level 3, and 2 of them were exiting out of the program in a level 4. So now that I get to branch out and go to multiple schools with more need of Ls or children with need, I think for me, I would like to know more of how I can be a support and not just saying, okay, let me get you in contact with someone else. Because I feel sometimes constantly passing people off, it does rub people the wrong way. Like, you're trying to be helpful, but I would really like to just build my capacity around how I can be supportive to teachers and their families.
Great. Would anyone else like to choose one to discuss?
I'll go. So I think that for me, I am looking at the what do you want to commit to and hold yourself to that is within your sphere of control. And I think that's just committing to and staying focused on supporting our administrators, our teachers, our school-based teacher leaders to help our students to grow and have an impact, hopefully. But I think the sphere of control is also what's standing out, and remembering, that you can't control everything, you can't do everything, and just remembering that what can I control to have that focus, to support that focus, and what do I have to kind of just say, okay, I'm gonna let that go, or it's out of my realm, or I'll have another time or place to work with that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good way to stay focused, but also a great way to reduce stress. I think that oftentimes a lot of our challenges with the work that we do comes from trying to control parts of the puzzle that we don't necessarily have control over. So when you commit yourself to staying focused on the goals and the things that you can do, and the things that you do have direct control over, I think that it helps with stress, and also being mindful to stick to the plan. And oftentimes it's easy for us to deviate from the plan or get pulled into other things. So thank you so much for sharing. Anyone else?
I was actually going to share the same one. Just really wanting to commit to be as supportive as possible to the schools in my network, to just ensure that in any way that I can assist and support, that I make sure that I do that, but also recognize that it is not my sole responsibility to ensure that, like I alone just can't make sure that every student and every family is given all the tools that they need, but just commit myself to do the part that I can.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing, Tiffany.
So this is kind of like what our time together would look like. We had a little mix and mingle. We're going to overview the academic framework. We're going to do an overview of our instructional guides to give you that basis, that foundation. We're going to leave time hopefully for Q&A and reflection and conclusion. So you guys, I'm sure have seen this before. I'm sure I see shakes of your head. We always try to include it just to make sure that there is an understanding that there is an office of there is an academic framework, and under this academic framework, this big umbrella, right? All of the supports are included, and they're geared towards our goals and guardrails as well. Anything else you want to add, Dr. Brickhouse? No, okay.
Not at this moment. Again, I just think that it's critical for everyone to understand how our work is aligned to the overarching academic framework that was developed to support all children throughout the district. But in particular, our focus obviously is on students who receive special education services and our English language students as well. We wanted to make sure that we were as inclusive as possible to ensure that teachers know how to support that group of students, and to make sure that our students, all students, are receiving access to the core with supports.
Can somebody take off yourselves off mute and read this quote for us, please?
You never teach a subject, you always teach a child. You teach children in a way that they will learn, and then things will fall in place for them. Dorothy Height.
Any thoughts?
Thanks, Deb. We as coaches, and even when we were in our last department, we always stress that teachers should know the way their students learn and where their strengths and where their areas of need are. And when it says you teach children in a way that they will learn, not every child will fit that round peg in that square hole. So you have to be mindful of what works and not kill yourself in doing it. You have 30 kids, you're going to teach it 30 different ways, but to be mindful of, you want children to be successful and you want to bring their brilliance into it. So I feel like this really leans on that.
Thank you. Anybody else?
That part of the sentence stuck out to me the most too, Danny. You teach children in the way that they learn, and it just made me think about the need for differentiation when we are teaching anything. Of course, you're going to deliver it in a way, and a lot of times I think that teachers deliver in a way that makes them comfortable, or in a way that you just kind of, to nobody's fault, you just hope that everyone will get it. But when they don't, then you need to go back, and it's not just you, I taught the subject, I taught the content. You need to teach in a way that people are actually learning it, because it's not really teaching if nobody learns.
No, thank you. Very good points. Thank you for sharing. So we're going to do a little bit of a dive into the English language learner and the dual language learner. These are just some fun facts, right? When you think about the ESOL population. So we have over 19,000 students that are English learners in the school district of Philadelphia, and or 60%. We have 387 ESOL teachers, 200 and plus programs. In our district, we had 6, so 7 dual language schools. We are hoping to continue to grow our dual language schools. which encompass about 800 students and 39 dual language teachers. When we think about our English learners in terms of the district, there's way over 100 languages spoken. 51% of those, that language is Spanish within the school district of Philadelphia. But even within a school that you support, you might have over 30, 40 languages spoken just in that one school. As you see here by the graph, this is just kind of like giving you an idea of the languages that are spoken within the school district of Philadelphia. This is the front page of our English language development guide. What is the English development guide? It provides English language development supports. The instruction is specifically designed for English proficiency. The core instruction is mandated for English learners, but beneficial to all learners. This is very key. This is key, right? So all the things that are within this instructional guide are great. They can be used for your whole entire class, all learners, but they are essential for English learners. I want to make that clear, right? These practices are great for everyone, but they are extremely essential for English learners. And this takes place throughout the day for English learners and is delivered by both ESOL teacher and non-ESOL teacher. Can somebody get off mute? I don't know what the correct term is. Get off mute, take yourself off mute. So my apologies if I'm not saying it correctly. Read that orange part on the bottom for me.
This means that all teachers are responsible for incorporating language instruction as well as scaffolding and accommodations to allow ELs to access the standards to which the course is aligned.
This is very important, and I do want you to have this takeaway. It is imperative for folks to understand that it's not just the sole responsibility of the ESOL teacher to provide these supports and scaffolds needed for our children that are ELs. Now I'm gonna flip-flop a little bit. This is the cover for our dual language learner guide. This is the guide for our 7 dual language schools. What does this mean, dual language, and what does it encompass, this guide? Its instruction is specifically designed to meet grade level academic standards in language proficiency of instruction in English and in Spanish. It is important for you to note that the 7 dual language schools learn English and Spanish simultaneously, and they learn grade level academic content. It's not just this is paper, this is papel, this is dog, this is perro. We are grade level academically standard instruction for these 7 schools in both English and Spanish. Students are learning to become biliterate and bilingual in English and in Spanish, which means that they are demonstrating their swirl. Anything you can take away, you could take away the swirl. When I say swirl, it's your speaking, writing, reading, and listening. Hence the swirl. I know it doesn't have the I, but that's what I remember when I took my coursework in ESOL, and it kind of always just stuck. All lessons should have this incorporated where the students are speaking, reading, writing, and listening. And just so happens that in monolingual classrooms, this happens only in one language, but when you're in the dual language, this is happening simultaneously in both languages. We have cross-cultural and cross-linguistic competence, which is making the culture of the classroom inclusive of all students and building on students' culturally and linguistics resources. Again, I know I'm flip-flopping, but I wanted to get you kind of like a base for both of our instructional guides. Just to highlight some of the things, again, that are incorporated with the ELD. Now, this is for ESOL, right? So ELD instructional guide is for English language development, which is for our English learners. Our dual language guide is for our dual language learners, which are in 7 schools and encompass about 300 students. EL point person development, classroom teacher support, identification, EL process monitoring, reclassification, leadership collaboration, curriculum development. So when you have folks asking you questions, this is where on English learners, whether it's compliance, instruction, this is where you would try to, like Danielle, you said, kind of like passing the buck. However, you can look through this guide. It is an extensive guide. You also have your multilingual managers to support you, which I will let you know which ones you can communicate with in terms of what network and what schools. Within the English language development guide, we follow these guiding principles, which is the 3 moments of a lesson. If you look at the units that have been created, we have aligned some of our resources included in the ELA and math units to align to the 3 moments of a lesson. The ELD guide reflects STP's overarching philosophy of equity and inclusion. It provides all teachers, please keep that in mind, all teachers, not just English language teachers, not just dual language teachers. I really want to emphasize that this is for all teachers to provide a framework for implementing high challenge, high support instruction in all content areas. And it aligns also to all SDP instructional guides. So we are in alignment with the math and ELA instructional guides, and we are currently aligning it to social studies and science as well. This is just kind of a brief overview of how that objective of the moment, that 3 moment of a lesson, and how we have aligned it to ELA and math. We will provide you with this presentation, so know that this will be given to you, and this is also included in the instructional guide. As you can see here on the left, it does have our 3 moment of a lesson, which is preparing the learner, interacting with concepts, and extending understanding, and what the objectives of each of those moments are, and again, that alignment with ELA and math. I'm going to pause here because I've been talking for quite some time, and I know we're going to leave some question and answers for later. Just going to sit a little second or two and just let you look at this. Any questions kind of quickly arise at this moment, and if not, just jot them down and we can address them later as well. Charlotte's like, yep, Batista, you've been talking too much. Sorry, I just get excited about the work. Any glaring aha moments, any glaring like, uh-oh, this doesn't make sense to me. Go ahead, Danielle.
More of an aha, I think of teachers saying, oh, it's another thing I have to do. And what I've noticed is how you say all of our students would benefit from this, so that our ELs are for our ELs in this moment, it is not like a call out, like, oh, this is just for you because you don't understand, you know what I mean? Not that I would think teachers would do that, but every student would benefit from this, from our struggling learners or our striving learners or English learners, pretty much even up to like our high performance, because there might be misconceptions that they just don't understand or they just don't know the vocabulary. So to me, like, this is just what a really good lesson would be planned for.
Absolutely. And again, I also want to highlight that these are already incorporated for teachers within our units. Now we're going to flip a little bit for our dual language guide, because I know some of you might be supporting some of our dual language schools, which I also want to mention that I'm looking at my board. I'm sorry, because I don't want to forget anyone. Marin is a dual language school. Cayuga is a dual language school. Taylor, Elkin, McClure, Cramp, and Southwark. Those are our 7 dual language schools. We have another one coming. I can put those in the chat, Danielle, if you wanted me. No, okay, sorry.
How does the school become a dual language?
That's a very good question. It's in our instructional guide. It's a process that the school does have to go through, right? There are some steps that they need to go through, and it is included in our dual language guide for our leaders to find in case they are interested.
Would it be because a large percent of their population speaks multiple languages, or could a school
It could. Right now we are only offering dual language in Spanish, like a dual language school in Spanish. You know, hopefully in the future, I know our second most largest language is Portuguese. We have a huge Portuguese families in our communities. So that's something I would definitely, and you know, in the future look towards. But right now we are only offering in Spanish, and that depends, right? Sometimes the community is interested in their students learning another language. Sometimes it is that they do have a high ESOL population, but do remember that a dual language is 50-50, right? So we have to have 50% of students that dominate that L1, which would be that Spanish, and 50% of that dominating the monolingual, which is the English only.
Okay, thank you.
So in this guide, you would find cross-linguistic supports, dual language leader and classroom support, universal screener guidance. We have, like I said, in the schools, Learning Network 11, 5, and 10 encompass our dual language, some of our dual language schools, and we have our dual language curriculum development. This image represents what does dual language mean when we say dual language in a dual language classroom. I'm going to give you a second to read the orange lettering on the right hand side, and then simultaneous look at the graph or the picture, and let me know your thoughts. Does anything pop out at you? Is there any misconceptions that you might be having?
I do have one question. So I'm in Network 11, so like 5 out of the 7 schools are schools
That's correct.
that I was supporting originally. They've since been shifted where now Elkin is the only one that's on my like particular caseload. But it seemed like in some of the classrooms, they were, I guess I want to know if there's like a evolution in that some of the classrooms, when you start, you only speak Spanish and then
Yes.
they go to English, or is it both at the same?
So it is both at the same time, depending on the program model. A school can start 90-20, where 90% of the classroom time is spent in Spanish only, and then 20% in English. The program must grow though. So for that following year, let's say you start 90-20 in kindergarten, you grow 80-20, 80-10, sorry, 80-20. Then you keep growing and growing. I'm like, wait, nope, I said that right the first time. Keep growing until you get to a 50-50.
Okay, so the goal is the 50. That makes sense. Got it.
Yep. And that happens in Southwark also. Some of our program schools, it depends on the model that the school is following. I want to be clear also of what biliteracy is and what biliteracy is not. So when we talk about biliteracy, we talk about authentic text. It is not translated materials. When we talk about biliteracy, it's students receiving instruction in both of the language every day. What it is not is reteaching content for understand areas of learning or literacy development. What it is not that each language art class focuses on different standards. What it is not is classes focus on the same standard. What it is, we're bridging, and by bridging, we mean that there is cross-linguistic bridges and connections being held in both languages. So if I'm talking about tornadoes in English and I'm, have it a text about tornadoes, when I go into my Spanish class, we can start our lesson talking about, devastation that happens across the world in a different aspect or in a different story. And we ask about, tornados, right? And what is tornados? And we make that connection that tornados is tornadoes. It is a cognate. So those specific bridges are imperative in a biliteracy. So you should see when you walk into those classrooms, those connections being held around the classroom, within the teacher, in English and in Spanish, where they're both bridging simultaneously. Now, who do I contact for support? You will have this also, this list is also in your handout as well. So you do have who are your multilingual managers for each of your learning networks. And we also have our curriculum specialist here. So if you have any questions in terms of the units or a teacher needs support with the planning, definitely these are folks that you want to contact. And again, Danielle, I go back to what you had said in the beginning of that you want to make sure that you're professionally developed as well. These are folks that you are absolutely can contact, have a brief meeting with, schedule a meeting with them to answer any questions that you're receiving out from the field. For supports for our English learners and our dual language learners. I'm just gonna let this up for a little bit as we transition to the amazing Dr. Charlotte Brickhouse.
Thank you so much. I am going to share my screen. I'll share my screen if I can.
Yes, hold on, let me stop sharing mine.
Thank you.
As we transition, you guys can stand up, stretch a little. I know you've been listening to me for the past 30 minutes. Get a little stretch.
Can everyone see the screen? All right. Let me just, I'm sorry, I'm trying to make it a full screen. For some strange reason, it is not allowing me to do it. I can't see, 1 minute. There we go. Sorry about that. All right. It is still not showing the full screen.
It's okay, Dr. Brickhouse, if you go down where you weren't before, click slideshow on top, you should be able to.
If I go
Right on the right-hand corner, it said, you see my
Yep, I see
bubble,
it.
you
I see
click slideshow, there you go.
Yep, my apologies. I've never had that happen before. All right, so we're going to transition to support for our special ed students. I don't know how many of you are aware, but around 2 years ago, my colleagues and myself created a special education instructional guide. It was definitely something that was new, At that time, we were excited about forging forward and making sure that instruction became a focus in our special ed classes. Many years ago, for those of you who may have been around for some time, there was a document that a lot of special educators use called Access to the Core. So Access to the Core was a document that I used when I was a special educator for many, many years. This document was very useful, meaningful, and helpful as I tried to support my students in the classroom. So that was at the core of what we wanted to do. We wanted to create a document that would do just that, but kind of take it into the 2020, because I think it was around that time. I don't want to say 21st century, but we definitely wanted to elevate it and to make it similar to Access to the Core, but almost like a 2.0 version, right? That was steeped in research. And our research came from one of the premier and leading organizations in special education, which is the Council for Exceptional Children. They collaborated with the CEDAR organization, and the CEDAR organization focuses on development of educators. So together, these two organizations came together and they talked and researched and figured out the best way to support students with disabilities. Through that research, they were able to come up with a document named High Leverage Practices. And this document is specifically for special educators and how to support our learners in the classroom. But I do want to note that it is also useful for struggling learners. It is not just for children who have already been diagnosed with a disability. So from that document, we were able to create focus groups. We made sure that we interacted collaboratively with other offices under OAS to ensure that this guide was something that was going to be fully inclusive and accessible, and also had the brain power and the input from other offices. So we created our special education instructional guide. Before I move on, I do want to talk a little bit about the way that the document is formatted. So unlike Access to the Core, while we provide multiple strategies for our teachers, we also provide some historic context and some law, right? So we dive a little bit into the 13 disability categories. We talk about autism. And one of the reasons why we wanted to do that is in having conversations with teachers and principals, there was a lot of misinformation. There was a lot of misconception. There was a lot of practices that were seen in the classrooms that weren't the most appropriate for our students. So we wanted to make sure that people fully understood what autism is, that others fully understood what an emotional disturbance is and what it looks like and how to support our children in those 13 disability categories. So one of the things that we want to discuss that is new for this year, or that I want to discuss that's new for this year, is the quality indicators. So this is new that we will be adding to our instructional guide, but it's not new in terms of it being around for a while. So Patan is an office in Pennsylvania that provides training and support to school districts throughout the state of Pennsylvania. So Patan has already developed an emotional support quality indicator. So what is a quality indicator document? Essentially, this document, the purpose of the document is to provide educators with what a quality program looks like, right? And so we know that we have self-contained classes in our district, and we also have classes where our children are included with their non-disabled peers. In our self-contained class, the question always comes up, what does a good AS class look like? What are some indicators? What should I see? What should I be looking for? And so Patan again developed quality indicators for an emotional support program and what you should look for or what you should see when you are in those classes. We are, as a school district, my team and I, developing now quality indicators for learning support classes, self-contained, and those classes that also include our children, life support, multiple disabilities, autistic support, and our deaf and hard of hearing students as well. So we want to make sure that when a teacher or a principal or an assistant principal or even an assistant suit walks into a classroom, that there is some indication for them what a quality program looks like. My apologies. I'm in a school today, as you can hear. So the various components of the quality indicator would include program accountability. What does the program look like, and how should we make sure that we are pausing and taking some time throughout the year to evaluate the program, right? And what do I mean by evaluate the program? So based on the indicators, we're going to take time to sit down and have a conversation with the leadership of a school, the principal, the SBTLs, the assistant principal, and say to them, hey, here's this document. What are we seeing in your classes throughout the school? And I'll talk about what I've observed, and we're going to, just discuss what's working well, what is not working, areas of improvement. So again, another way that the document can be utilized in the school. Obviously, evaluation and assessment is critical for our students. And what does that look like? Is there a cadence? Is there a schedule for evaluating and assessing our students? It should be happening on a regular basis, especially for students with special needs. But is there a time when we are stopping to evaluate and analyze data, right? Are we doing it every month where we're gathering data from a specific disability type? So my thoughts are, as you sit down and you have these conversations with the principal and the school leadership team, develop a schedule with them to review data. And it could be, all right, in the month of November, children have been in school for, a little over 2 months. Let's sit down and talk about the data that we see in our learning support classes. Let's analyze it. Let's figure out how we can strengthen our programs in these particular classes. What would that look like? Could we offer some more training and support around co-teaching or academic instruction? Have we looked inside of the SPED instructional guide to see what supports we can provide our educators? Again, there is a component on social, emotional, and behavior. What does that look like in all of our classes, not just our ES classes, right? So this is critical to learning. We all know that if the classroom management is not as strong as we would like, it causes problems for our students in terms of accessing instruction, right? So we want to make sure that there is something in place in all of our classes so our children are learning and growing socially and emotionally as well. Collaboration and communication is always, always key in the work that we do together so that we can support all of our children. Again, I think that is a common theme for today. We are speaking of all of them, making sure that there are supports in place for every type of student, not just English language learners, not just students with special needs. We also have to consider our struggling learners and our learners who do well. How are we supporting them? And it takes collaboration, communication. Another critical piece is that post-secondary transition. Oftentimes we think about our students who are in high school. We definitely want to start moving down some grades and talking about post-secondary outcomes for our students and what does a good transition plan look like? When is the most appropriate time to start talking to children about what they would like to do after high school, right? And when I say after high school, I'm being very intentional about that because some of our students stay in school until 21. So when is the best time to start having these conversations with our children, with their parents, and with the school team? Professional development, again, is critical to ensure that all of these things are happening, to ensure that we are not just talking about it, but we are providing the training and we are following up on the training that we provide to our educators. We're following up on the training that we provide to our school leaders. So we have to ensure that everything is also in alignment to our overarching OAS goal, which is quality tier 1 instruction for our ELA and math. We want to make sure that that's aligned, which is aligned to our board goals and guardrails and aligned to our instructional focus for our SPED students. So another critical piece is, again, after we have had these conversations, after we provided training, what is our program action plan look like? How are we going to target and support our students? How are we developing that schedule? How often are we coming together to be engaged in conversations that specifically focus on data, engaged in conversations that specifically focus on behavior, if that is a challenge at a school, engaged in conversations that specifically focus on the quality of programming for our students in that school, and more importantly, throughout the school district. That is also critical. And so, not to overwhelm you because there is a lot on here, but I just wanted everyone to understand that the domains of the quality indicators don't have to be done at one time. Obviously, it would be way too much and way too overwhelming. But again, when you have these conversations with your school team, you can choose 1 or 2 areas of focus and then work on a game plan and action plan that you can then strive towards for the remainder of the school year. All right, so getting back to the high leverage practices and the 4 domains that we focus on and have focused on for the last 2.5 years or so. Assessment is the core, the foundation, and it helps to guide our instructional decisions. So making sure that our children are assessed regularly so that we can then determine what is needed for our students. We know that this is still the very beginning of the school year, and a lot of the work that we do right now is focused on assessing our children so that they can have a good start. And again, this is at the foundation, a core of all of the instructional work that we do. Collaboration, again, is critical. Are we having these conversations with everyone on the IEP team, not to negate our outside providers? So oftentimes we have individuals who provide services to our students outside of the school. So does a child have a TSS? Do they have a social worker outside of the school? Do they have an individual who comes in to support the child in their learning? So we want to make sure that they are a part of the conversation as well. Obviously, instruction is key when you're talking about high leverage practices, because there is a focus, 22 areas, 22 high leverage practices that this group of educators and researchers said is the best way to support our students instructionally. And again, that social emotional behavior piece, we know that if this is not addressed and it is strong, that it is very difficult for us to support our children the way that we need to instructionally. Are there any questions? I know I've been talking a lot. Are there any questions? No questions? All right, so we're going to move on. All right, so this year we want to focus on 4 high leverage practices. It is the instructional focus that we've had last year with the exception of teaching social behaviors. So we all know that implementation science tells us that it will take 3 to 5 years for practices to be implemented with fidelity. In our case, because we're a school district so large, I can definitely bank on that 5-year, 3 to 5 year being just a tad bit longer, because again, we have over 200 plus schools, thousands of educators. It's still something that's fairly new. So we want to ensure that we continue to solidify these practices in these instructional focus. So again, we want to focus this year on explicit instruction. We want to also focus on scaffolding supports for our students, teaching cognitive and metacognitive strategies. These are our mnemonics to help the concepts and the information that is taught stick. We also want to talk to teachers about neuroplasticity and the fact that even though our children have disabilities, they still definitely have the ability to learn more. And we also, again, want to teach those social behaviors that are critical for building positive relationships, but are also critical in moving children forward with their instructional programs as well. All right, are there any questions?
Would you say that this is very similar to the impactful practices that math and ELA is currently using?
Absolutely. So a lot of the impactful practices focus on explicit instruction. Ask me how I know. I worked on the document. So I wanted to make sure, again, that there was direct alignment, right? And explicit instruction is something that every child can benefit from. And explicit instruction goes very deep. On the surface, it seems like it's something that is that could be the same for every student, but trust me when I tell you, it looks very different for the varying population of students. So, for example, if our learning support students, if we are teaching them explicitly, it is systematic, it is direct, right? But for our students with autism, that explicit instruction looks very different in terms of like a task analysis and providing our students with a step-by-step for completing a specific task, where our learning support students, while they receive explicit instruction, it looks different. And so I want to make sure that our teachers understand how explicit instruction can look different for a different disability type and depending on the need of the student. And that's what's critical, the need of the student, because not everything is going to look the same, even for our individuals who are diagnosed with autism. All right. Any other questions? Okay, and so as I shared before, explicit instruction can go very, very deep. We are just really touching the surface with it for this presentation, but the hope is in the future, we will dig a little deeper with explicit instruction and helping teachers to understand how to teach new concepts explicitly. What does that look like when we're teaching children how to read? Because there is, again, a science to reading, and that means that when you are focused on the science of reading, there are multiple steps and each step has to be taught explicitly. And we have to make sure that our children understand before they move on. So for the last 2 years, I know that there has been a deep focus on not only the science of reading, but teaching students proper sounds so that they know how to pronounce words correctly, right? And we all know that that takes time, and that teachers even had to be taught and retrained on how to teach students the sounds properly. And so we want to make sure, again, that new material is taught in this way so that it sticks with our children and that they are able to understand the concept before moving on to the next part of a lesson or a concept. All right. And again, I'm just going to briefly touch two of the focus areas. Explicit instruction, scaffolding supports can be done in any classroom, not just students with special needs, but while it is a good practice for them and it is something that they need, it is something that will be very useful and beneficial to our students in any classroom. We all know that our historical data, the trends in our data hasn't changed much over the last 5 or 6 years. The majority of our students are struggling. That is our reality. So these practices will be useful for any student, not just our students with special needs. Right, are there any questions?
Yes, can I ask
Yep.
a question? Hello.
Sure.
Okay, so I already work with, I support Network 9, amongst other schools, and Network 7. So I already, because Network 9 has a very largely growing ESOL population, I already work with the multilingual manager to, kind of remind my SBTLs and the principals to, work with her for supports. And I think that there's, especially as the schools shift, obviously special ed is a little bit different, but as the schools shift, I feel that there is, and I've seen this across the board, and looking at these high leverage practices. So I think that there is a need for the SBTLs or classroom teachers to be seeing this as well and what that looks like. So for example, one of the things that I'm going to have the Network 9 multilingual manager do at the SBTL meeting in October, and I've already met, it's Holly. So we've already talked about it. And she's going to go through with the SBTLs, the ELD guide. And she's also going to look into some of the lesson guidances, and we're going to have those conversations about, okay, so here's the section where it says ELD supports, and here is what that might look like. Let's say I have a level 1 or 2 student, so what might I be doing during this lesson to support my students? What might that look like? And I feel like a lot of SBTLs and a lot of teachers in general, they need that PD around that practicality of it, not just saying, hey, we're calling it out for you in the lesson guidance, here it is, but how am I really making those decisions, and what is it going to look like in my classroom as I'm have these kids, those kids. So I'm wondering who in special ed, because I know my case manager or director, there's 2 people. I know I have Nicole Velez. So who in special ed could also possibly come and do some work around that? Because again, a lot of our kids who have IEPs or are our striving learners, that's another question. Like, how am I going to use this to support them in application, in implementation? So I think that these are a first step, and they're obviously very helpful because it's things that for years we have been working on, and now it's like, okay, here's the scaffold. So when we're planning our lesson, let's think about that. But I still think more work needs to be done with our SBTLs around supporting that and coaching, and our teachers, especially in the networks that have very large ESOL populations, and seeing, how can this fit with my striving learners, so that we're not just putting sentence starters up for everybody in the class or sentence frames, whatever it may be, but we're understanding how we can do that differentiation and meeting needs. So I just, who would the special ed person be that I could have come in and kind of work with, do that work?
Right. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. Wow. I know that a lot of these practices we have heard of time and time again, but what matters is how to apply the practices in the classroom. So in regards to a special ed person being a support in the actual school, one of the things that we're doing as an office is training our staff so that they can turn around the training to the school. So we are on it. We're on it.
Thank you.
My instructional team, while it's very small, it is very powerful and mighty. So if you connect with me, I can make sure that someone from my team can reach out to you and SBTLs that you support and
Perfect.
teachers that you support so that we can provide additional training for them. But I agree with you. It means nothing unless these practices are modeled by our teachers and conversations are had, right? I am going to teach this specific skill and I need to know how I can scaffold this skill in the classroom. I'm not sure if enough of those conversations are being had. So again, this is just us touching the surface. We are definitely planning to dig deeper, and we have multiple levels of support for our teachers and our staff. So you can definitely, again, reach out to me directly or to reach out to your director or case manager, but we are in the process of, providing some training to those in our office as well.
Great. Thank you so much.
Sure, not a problem. Not a problem at all. All right, and so the contact information, I'm going to drop a link in so that you would have your contact information for your directors and your case managers for a specific learning network, because we have gone back to learning networks. We were regions for the last 2 years. We are learning networks. So I'll be sure to drop that in the chat. All right, now we are at the question and answer portion of this presentation. Are there any other questions that anyone has? I see some head shaking no. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, and if you think of any between now and later today or tomorrow or at any time, please make sure that you send an email to me and or Dr. Batista. And again, I'm here to be an active support. I'm not just someone who talks about it. I will follow up on what I say. And I will make sure, if I cannot do it directly, I will make sure that someone from my team is able to reach out and to follow up as well. All right.
I'm talking with the mute button on, I'm sorry. In your handout also, you have all of the Office of Curriculum and Instruction and the Office of Specialized Services emails. I know it's one of those things that you kind of like, hey, this is a good question for multilingual at Phila SD. You can contact, like I said, like Charlotte had said, Dr. Brickhouse, contact me directly and we will make sure to provide you with what is needed.